Welcome to my world history notes, where I read from the book I wrote to teach homeschoolers world history. A Bible believer looks at world history. Um, you can buy it on lulu.com, amazon.com, at the Bible Baptist bookstore. Just follow me here. Um, Now, we're in World War II. We're finishing up with the book. I only went to the end of World War II, and then I'm going to continue with separate special topic studies that are beyond the scope of the book. But I think it just gives you a basic survey. So just so you know, people, places, dates, concepts, things like that. And there's so much more deeper you can go. Uh, but we're in now January 1943. Roosevelt, Churchill, and the CCS met at the Casablanca Conference. The British agreed to the dominance of the U.S. in the Pacific, and the U.S. agreed to postpone any cross-channel invasion until 1944, agreeing to first invade Sicily and Italy for the purpose of aiding the communist Soviets in their fight. Highest priority was given to building anti-submarine craft. A fateful decision was made at this point, guaranteeing the extension of the war for 2 more years. The leaders of both the U.S. and Great Britain, Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Winston Churchill, agreed to insist that they would accept nothing short of the unconditional surrender of the Axis powers. This meant that on several occasions, when German military leaders offered to surrender the German army or parts of it to the Allies in return for mercy for Germany, they refused, demanding the capitulation of the entire German nation. This resulted in many hundreds of thousands of more military and civilian deaths before Germany was finally destroyed as a nation, and it remains divided and remained divided in half for a long time until the end of the Cold War. J.F.C. Fuller, the British general who was one of the pioneers of mechanized warfare, of whom Hitler referred to his own tanks as Fuller's children, wrote a book entitled The Second World War. In the book, he stated the Casablanca Conference prolonged the war by making disaffected German units go on fighting for Hitler out of desperation, knowing they could not surrender without Germany being destroyed. As reported by Curtis Dahl, FDR's son in law, George Earle had held a number of government posts, including a naval officer who commanded a subchaser as a naval officer, a subchaser in World War I. He was decorated for bravery. From 1933 to 1934, he was ambassador to Austria. From 1935 to 1939, he was governor of Pennsylvania. From 1940 to 42, he was ambassador to Bulgaria. Then he returned to the Navy as an officer, and as lieutenant commander was the chief gunnery officer on the Hermitage, which carried General George S. Patton in North Africa. Just before the Casablanca Conference, FDR assigned him as FDR's own personal naval attaché at Istanbul, Turkey. Nazi Admiral Canaris, head of Germany's Secret Service, met with him clandestinely, that is, secretly, and offered the surrender of Germany's armed forces, but with dignity. His only request wasn't of a promise, but that Roosevelt would simply indicate that he might willingly accept an honorable surrender from Germany's armed forces. Governor Earle passed this on to FDR, but his message was totally ignored. Canaris had stated that he knew that the Soviet Union's purpose was to dominate Europe and the world, and that Hitler had made some serious errors and led his country down the path to destruction. He also offered to move the entire German army to the Eastern Front to stop the Soviets. Now, this may have been a realization that strategically, Hitler's willingness to attack the West was insanity. Remember, the real war that Germany wanted was with the Soviet Union. Governor Earle then met with German Ambassador Fritz von Papen, who was against Hitler. Earle was convinced that the Soviets, whom we were supporting against Hitler, who were demanding that we open up a second front by landing in Sicily, Italy, or France, and who had signed an agreement with Japan so it would not have to fight them, were purposed by their agents within the U.S. and by their own efforts to take over the world. They had their own idea of global domination. FDR ignored, not disputed or disagreed with, but ignored his warnings, his requests, his pleas. Curtis Dahl repeatedly in his book states that after 1933, FDR became a dupe, a stooge of socialist groups, and was controlled by his left-wing advisor, Lewis Howe, and then Harry Hopkins and his wife Eleanor Roosevelt, who had completely sold out to socialist ideals. If you remember, it was a belief that the settlement of World War I, which was so awful toward Germany, was only because the Allies wanted Germany to be completely destroyed and taken apart. Germany fought on and continued with its terrible atrocities against Jews and other civilians in World War II. Poland had become the home of death camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau and Treblinka, where thousands of Jews were murdered. In the end, 6 million Jews would die in what became known as the Holocaust. One significance of the Holocaust is that it was a clear effort by Nazi Germany to eliminate the Jewish race, or at least to eliminate it in Europe. In the beginning, simply removing them was satisfactory to Hitler and associates like Himmler, but even remarked that having them emigrate to Palestine or to America was a more German option than exterminating them. That changed with the war. With FDR not willing to up the quota to receive more Jewish refugees, the Jews were nearly helpless. There were programs to help Jewish orphans, but many of the bills to offer official United States aid had died in committee before the war. Jewish refugees that made it to England from Germany and Austria were imprisoned by the British in concentration camps for the duration of the war. The United States also detained Japanese citizens of the U.S. in camps, even though Japanese Americans, known as Nisei, heroically fought against Germany for the U.S. Army, and no acts of sabotage were ever reported, to my understanding, committed by Japanese Americans. So we're going to make a couple of comments. I want to make one last comment about this, and then go on to some military things. Ruthless Dominican Republican dictator Trujillo, however, wanted to welcome as many as 100,000 Jews. Now, get this: when Americans are reluctant to accept Jews, and Britain is locking them up for fear that they might be agents of Hitler, but Trujillo wanted to welcome 100,000 Jews. That's what he stated. He knew they would enrich his country with their intelligence skills. Not that many came over, a very small amount, but they represent a large part of his dairy industry, I believe. Still, there were many heroes who tried to save as many Jews as possible during this time. These included the Swedish humanitarian Raoul Wallenberg, Nazi businessman Oskar Schindler, and Japanese diplomat Chiune Sugihara, among others, who risked all and saved literally thousands of Jews from death. As stated previously, even boxing hero and commando Matt Smelling is credited with saving some Jewish people from certain death. Still, there were not enough heroes, as many thousands of Jewish men, women, and children were brutally murdered in an inexcusable orgy of torture and killing. So we're going to get back to the military aspects of this next. And like I say, this is just skimming the surface. So there's a lot more you can dig into, and you might come to different conclusions than I did. You might find different authors who say different things, but I hope that this will encourage you to do your own study of World War II and world history, and come to your own conclusions from your study, rather than just me or somebody on the internet telling you something. Thank you for listening.